Welcome, YouTubers, to another episode in my Grammar Heroes series. In this video, there will be 86 math knowledge practice test questions that should fully prepare you for the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, that is the ASVAB, as well as the pre-screening Internet Delivered Computer Adaptive Test, that is the PiCAT. Of course, in order to get the most from this video, you'll want to pause the video before I read a practice test question, attempt to work out the question on your own, and then resume playing the video to check your solution. As a brief reminder, on the actual ASVAB and PiCAT, you are not permitted to use a calculator or a reference sheet. So as you work your way through these 86 math knowledge practice test questions, try not to use any of those resources. As far as evaluating your performance on this practice test goes, I want to say this: if you can answer 70 to 80% or more of these questions correctly, I would consider that very good and outstanding, and chances are you're ready to take this test right now. If, on the other hand, you answer 60 to 69% of these questions correctly, I would personally consider that average, and in that case, I would recommend that you study for a few weeks more before you go take the test. Finally, if you answer 59% or fewer of these questions correctly, I would say you need to make some significant improvements, and for that reason, I would consider studying for a few months before you go and take this test. Thankfully enough, my channel has videos for every topic that you should encounter in this math knowledge subtest, and for that reason, I'll include timestamps that are going to be associated with each question in the description of this video. So if you struggle with a particular topic, look in the description, find a link to the video on that topic, and you should be able to understand it from there. Finally, I want to say this. So far, my free courses, study guides, and practice tests have helped more than 70,000 people significantly improve their test scores. So if you want to support my mission of helping everyone, including those who can't afford expensive test prep, get ready to take the ASVAB or PiCAT for free, please consider becoming a channel member. You could do that simply by clicking the join button on my homepage. It should be right next to the subscribe button. So with all that finally being said, let's go ahead and get started with today's video. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says 5.12 times 10 to the negative fifth power can be expressed as, so I'm going to write 5.12 nice and big down here. If this was times 10 to the positive fifth power, I'd take my decimal and move it to the right 5 times. Since it's 10 to the negative fifth power, however, I'm going to move my decimal 5 times to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to add zeros accordingly. So that is our answer. Again, this is a test of your knowledge of some basic scientific notation. The answer choice with 4 zeros is B. On this test, you do have to know some basics about scientific notation, so check out my linked video if you need more help with this one. This ASVAB PiCAT math knowledge practice test question says simplify the ratio 12 to 18. So we're given the ratio 12 to 18, and we want to simplify it. In other words, we want to find a number that goes into both 12 and 18 evenly. You should recognize right away that both 12 and 18 are divisible by 6. Specifically, 12 divided by 6 is going to be 2, and 18 divided by 6 is going to be 3. So when we simplify this ratio, it becomes 2 to 3. That's all there is to that one. Don't overthink it because it's as simple as that. This ASVAB math knowledge practice test question says this: what is the next number in the following series? We have 3, 16, 6, 12, 12, and 8. You should see that this series is broken into 2 patterns. The first pattern is pretty easy to recognize. To go from 3 to 6, you multiply by 2, of course. To go from 6 to 12, you multiply by 2 again. And to go from 12 to this missing number in the series, you're going to multiply by 2 again, which is going to make this 24. So the answer to this one is D24. The second part in this series is as follows. To go from 16 to 12, you subtract 4. From 12 to 8, you subtract 4. And to go from 8 to the number after 24, you would subtract by 4 if you needed to. That is that one. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: what fraction of the figure is shaded? As you can see, we have a figure below, and in that figure, 2 parts of it are shaded. The easiest approach to solving this one is to draw a line from the left side to the right side of the figure, And in doing so, you'll see that we create 10 equal parts to this figure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Of course, it should be pretty obvious that 2 out of the 10 parts are shaded. In other words, 2/10 of this figure is shaded. Of course, that's not one of our answer choices because we could reduce this by a common factor of 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So in other words, D, 1/5 of this total figure is shaded. What is the missing number in the following series? We have 1, 4, 27, blank, and then 3,125. All right, so the pattern is as follows. We have 1 to the 1. 1 to the first power is 1. We have 2 squared. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 to the third. 3 times 3 times 3 is in fact 27. So that must mean our missing number is going to be 4 to the fourth. Of course, that looks like this. 4 to the fourth is equal to 4 multiplied by itself 4 times. And if you can't work that out mentally, you can work it off to the side as needed. Should be able to get started by saying 4 times 4 is 16. So then we have 16 times 4. Again, if you can't do it mentally, do it off to the side like this. 4 times 6 is 24, carry a 2. 1 times 4 is 4, plus 2 is 64. So this becomes 64 times 4. Once we work this out, we'll have our answer. 4 times 4 is 16, carry a 1. 6 times 4 is 24, plus 1 is 25. So this is C. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says that 40% is equal to the fraction x over 30. What is the value of x? So for this one, we're going to translate this statement into an equation that we can then solve. It says if 40%, well, 40% is going to be expressed in decimal form as 0.4 or as a fraction as 2/5. I'm going to use the decimal 0.4 is equal to, so we need an equal sign, the fraction x over 30. This is a one-step equation. To solve it, we have to multiply both sides of the equation by 30. This crosses out here, leaving you with x on this side. Clearly, the only thing we have left to do is 30 times 0.4. Move our decimal one place to the right to make this 30 times 4. Once we work this out, we'll move our decimal place one place to the left. This is 0, 12. Move our decimal back into the left. X in this case equals 12, which is answer choice D. Math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if x plus 5 cents equals 83 cents, then x equals. So for this one, we're solving an equation, albeit with decimals. I'm going to go ahead and write it down like this. And you don't have to include that 0 in front of the decimal if you don't want to. As we would when we solve equations, we're just going to get x equal to something by itself. So in other words, we're going to subtract 5 cents from both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with just x on this side. And we can see x is equal to 83 cents minus 5 cents. If you can't do this mentally, do it off to the side like I am. 3 minus 5 we can't do, so we have to borrow from this 8. This becomes a 7. This becomes 13. 13 minus 5 is going to be 8, of course. 7 minus 0 is just 7. So x in this case is 78 cents, which is answer choice B. Again, the ASVAB is a computer adaptive test, so in the beginning of the test, you will see questions that are as simple as this one. Answer this ASVAB math knowledge practice test question in 60 seconds. It says this: if 2 to the x power equals 32, what is x? So if you don't know this one right away, you can use some brute force to figure this one out. For instance, we could say 2 squared equals 2 times 2. And of course, 2 times 2 is 4. 2 to the third is 2 multiplied by itself 3 times. 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8. Likewise, 2 to the fourth is 2 multiplied by itself 4 times. Let's work that out. 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8 times 2 is 16. So that's not it. What about 2 to the fifth? 2 to the fifth is 2 multiplied by itself 5 times. That's 2 times 2, which is 4 times 2 is 8 times 2 is 16 times 2 is 32. So the correct answer to this one is D, 5. Solve this ASVAB math knowledge practice test question in 60 seconds. It says this: what are the factors of x squared plus 4x plus 3? So right away, you should recognize that this is a quadratic trinomial. Specifically, it's quadratic trinomial where the leading coefficient is 1. Therefore, you should know that if we can factor this, it's going to look like this. Now, our only task here is to find two numbers that multiply to positive 3 and add to positive 4. That should be easy enough to do. Plus 1 and plus 3 should work, in as much as 1 times 3 is 3, 1 plus 3 is 4. So the answer to this one is A, x plus 1, x plus 3. If you need help with factoring, check out my channel. Solve this ASVAB math knowledge practice test question in 60 seconds. It says, what is the value of 5 factorial? To answer this one, you have to know what factorial means. Factorial means take the number that's given, multiply it by every number that's less than the given number until you get to 1. So for instance, 3 factorial is equal to 3 times 2 times 1. Let's apply this to 5 factorial. That's going to be equal to 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Let's work this out mentally. It's not that hard to do. 5 times 4, of course, is 20. 20 times 3 is 60. 60 times 2 is 120. 120 times 1 is going to be 120. So the answer to this one is D, 120. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says, if the following series continues the same pattern, what is the next number in the series? All right, so for this one, uh, it looks like to get from 1 to 10, we're going to add 9. And to get from 10 to 7, we're going to subtract 3. Again, to get from 7 to 16, we're going to add 9, which means to get to 16 to the next number in this series, we're going to subtract 3. 16 minus 3 is 13. So the correct answer to this one is B, 13. If you want more practice, I do have an entire video on series and sequences that you may want to check out. What is 12 over 50 in simplest form? So for this one, we're being asked to reduce the fraction 12 over 50. In other words, we want to find a number that goes into both 12 and 50. And if you think about it, there's only one number, and that is 2. So we're going to reduce this by a factor of 2. 12 divided by 2 is 6, of course, whereas 50 divided by 2 is 25. So the furthest we can reduce this is 6 over 25, which is answer choice C. Some of you may be asking, Grammar Hero, is this really how hard the ASVAB gets? Well, remember, the ASVAB and PiCAT are computer adaptive tests. So in the beginning of the test, the questions are going to be as simple as this. The more easy questions you answer correctly, the harder the questions get later on in the test. So you want to be able to answer the simple ones quickly and accurately. This practice test question says 192 is what percent of 600? Let's write this as an equation and then solve. 192 is equal. What percent is unknown? Call it P. Of is multiply 600. Divide both sides by 600 to get P by itself. This crosses out, leaving you a P on this side. Let's go ahead and reduce this fraction. You should know that 192 and 600 are both divisible by 3. This becomes 200. What's 19 divided by 3? That's going to be 6, and you're going to have a remainder of 1. 12 divided by 3 is going to be 4. All right, so we want to express this as a percent. So let's go ahead and write it as a fraction over 100. 200 divided by 2 is 100. 64 divided by 2 is 32. So as a percent, this is 32%. Solve this ASVAB math knowledge practice test question in 60 seconds. It says if C is 30, what is F? Use C equals 5/9 times F minus 32 in parentheses. Let's start by plugging in 30 for C. This becomes 30 equals 5/9 times F minus 32. The next thing we want to do is clear this 5/9 in front of this set of parentheses. So we're going to multiply both sides of the equation by its reciprocal, notably by 9 over 5. This crosses out here and here, leaving you with F minus 32 on this side. Let's do this math mentally real quick. 5 goes into 5 one time, 5 goes into 30 6 times. So this is just 9 times 6. 9 times 6, you should know, is 54. Let's get F by itself by adding 32 to both sides of this. This crosses out here, leaving you with just F on this side. 54, 32, that's 6, 8. So F in this case is 86, which is D. Solve this ASVAB math knowledge practice test question in 60 seconds. It says this, what is the reciprocal of 0.25? Well, for this one, you're going to have to know what the fraction equivalent of 0.25 is, and that's 1/4. Likewise, you have to know how to find the reciprocal. To find the reciprocal of any number n, you simply take that number n and place it under 1 like so. All right, so let's go ahead and find the reciprocal of 1/4. That's going to be 1 over 1/4. Again, we're doing division involving a fraction here, so we're going to follow the algorithm keep, change, flip. We're going to keep this 1 the same, of course. We're going to change from division to multiplication like so. Then we're going to take the number in the denominator and flip it. So instead of writing it as 1 over 4, we're going to write it as 4 over 1. Let's think about what we're doing here. This becomes 1 times, what is 4 divided by 1? 4 divided by 1 is just 4. 1 times 4 is 4. So the answer to this one is B, 4. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if 6 is 25% of a number, what is 50% of the same number? So let's translate this part into an equation that we can then solve. It says 6 is equal. 25% is 0.25 in decimal form, or 1/4 as a fraction. I'm going to use the fraction 1/4. Of in math is multiply a number that's unknown, so we'll call that n. Let's solve this for n by multiplying both sides of this equation by the reciprocal of 1/4, which is 4 over 1. This crosses out, leaving us with n. 4 over 1 is just 4, so this is 4 times 6, which is 24. All right, so now we have to go to the second part, 50% of the same number. So we got to figure out what 50% of 24 is. That's 24 divided by 2, which is 12. So this is B12. This practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: if negative 2x plus 8 is less than 30, what is the value of x? So let's copy this one down. We have negative 2x plus 8 is less than 30. We're going to solve this inequality the same way we would solve an equation. That is to say, we're going to get x by itself. So we're going to subtract 8 from both sides. In doing so, this leaves us with negative 2x less than 30 minus 8 is going to be 22. Now we're going to divide both sides by negative 2 to get x by itself. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving us with just x on this side. When you multiply or divide across an inequality sign by a negative value, you have to change the direction of the inequality sign. That is to say, you have to flip it. So we're going to go ahead and flip it, as you can see. 22 divided by negative 2 is going to be negative 11. So the correct answer to this one is C, x is greater than negative 11. Solve this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says, what is the sum of 3x to the third minus 2x plus 8, 2x squared plus 5x, and x to the third plus 2x squared minus 3x minus 3? So in other words, we're going to add all of these polynomials together. In other words, we're going to combine their like terms. Again, like terms have the same letter variables raised to the same power. So let's start with 3x to the third. It's x is raised to the third power. Its corresponding like terms right there. 3x third plus x to the third is 4x to the third. Let's cross it out now. Let's move on to 2x squared, x raised to the second power. Its corresponding like terms right there. 2x squared plus 2x squared is 4x squared. Cross it out now. Let's do negative 2x. Negative 2x plus 5x is plus 3x. 3x minus 3x is 0. So all these just cross out to nothing. And then finally, we have 8 minus 3, which is plus 5. So our answer is A. This ASVAB PiCAT practice test question tests your understanding of circles. Specifically, we have two cameras, A and B, on a racetrack here. They have a central angle of 40 degrees. And given that, we want to figure out how far apart they are, which is the same thing as figuring out this arc length right here. Well, to find the arc length in a circle, you're going to take theta, which is the measure of the central angle, over 360. You're going to multiply it by the circumference of the circle. We have all these things. They have a central angle of 40 degrees, so we'll place that over 360. What is the circumference of our circle? It's the same thing as the perimeter, so that's going to be 360. Let's go ahead and reduce this. Cross out these corresponding zeros. 4 over 36 reduces to 1/9 times 360. This becomes 360 over 9. Again, 36 divided by 9 is 4. Just tack on that 0. So these two cameras are B, 40 feet apart on this track. In this video, I quickly want to address something that can be a source of confusion in the math knowledge subtest of the ASVAB and PiCAT. Specifically, let's talk about negative numbers raised to powers with parentheses as opposed to not with parentheses. When you have parentheses, that means you could do this: negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. Negative times a negative is a positive. Positive times a negative is a negative. Negative times a negative is a positive. If you don't have parentheses, however, you break this apart like this: negative 1 times 2 to the fourth, and then you follow the order of operations. You do exponents before this multiplication. So this becomes negative 1 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. We know this is 16, so this is -1 times 16. Positive times a negative is going to be a -16. Pay close attention to how things are notated. As you can see, a set of parentheses can make a big difference as to what answer you get. For this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, we have to find the area of a circle that has a diameter of 14 inches, and we're told to use 22/7 for pi. So we have to know this formula: area equals pi times the radius squared. In addition, we're only given the diameter of this circle, not its radius. We're going to need the radius, so we have to know that the diameter of a circle is 2 times as big as its radius. That is d equals 2r. Plug in 14 for diameter, solve for r, and this is going to be 7 equals r. Plug in 7 accordingly. This becomes 22/7 times 7 squared. This is 22/7 times 49. Again, place this over 1 so we can quickly cross reduce. 7 goes in a 7 one time, 7 goes in 49 7 times. 22/1 is 22, 7/1 is 7. So this is 22 times 7. If you can't do that mentally, do it off to the side very quickly. This is going to be C, 154 inches squared. For this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, we have to find the area of the shaded region in this figure. As you can see, we have a rectangle, which is length times width minus 2 circles, which is going to be 2 for each of the circles, times pi r squared. Of course, let's go ahead and plug those values in. This becomes 20 times 10 minus 2 times pi. The radius is right here. It's 5, so this is 5 squared. This becomes 200 minus 5 squared is 25 times 2 is 50, so this is minus 50 pi. So for pi, we're going to use 3.14. This would be 50 times 3.14. I'm going to let you work that out on your own. That said, I know that that becomes 157. 200 minus 157 is 43. So the answer to this one is C, 43. This math knowledge practice test question says this: if x equals 8, what is the value of y in the following equation? We have y equals x squared divided by 4 minus 2. Let's go ahead and start by plugging in 8 for x accordingly. This becomes y equals 8 squared divided by 4 minus 2. Again, we have to simplify this according to the order of operations. That's PEMDAS. We do parentheses first, exponents next, multiplication and division after that, and addition and subtraction after that. Here we have an exponent, so 8 squared is 8 times 8. This becomes 64 divided by 4 minus 2. 64 divided by 4 is 16, so this is 16 minus 2. 16 minus 2 is 14. If you couldn't do this math mentally, you have to do the long division off the side. 64 divided by 4. 4 times 1 is 4. 6 minus 4 is 2. Drop down this 4. 4 times 6 is 24 with no remainder. That is that one. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, we need 3 formulas. We need the perimeter of a rectangle, which is 2 width plus 2 length, a perimeter of a square, which is 4s, and the area of a square, which is s squared. We know the width and length. This is 12. This is 20. Let's do this mentally. 2 times 12 is 24. 2 times 20 is 40. 24 and 40 is 64. Again, according to the problem, these perimeters are the same, so this becomes 64 equals 4s. Divide both sides by 4. This crosses out, leaving with s equals 64 over 4, which is 16. Now that we know what s is, we can go ahead and plug it in here. This becomes 16 squared. That's the same thing as 16 times 16, which I'm going to let you work out on your own. I happen to know it's 256 centimeters squared d. I have that memorized, but you could work it out using this multiplication over here. So that is that one. This math knowledge practice test question says convert 24% to a fraction. To convert percents to fractions, you can simply place that number that you're given over 100. So this becomes 24 over 100. Of course, we can see that this isn't one of our answer choices, which means we could probably reduce this fraction a little bit further. Specifically, you should see that we can divide our numerator and denominator by a common factor of 4. 24 divided by 4 is 6. 100 divided by 4, of course, is 25. 6 and 25 don't have any common factors, so that's as far as we can reduce that fraction. The answer to this one is A, 6 over 25. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: What is the sum of the interior angles of a hexagon? So to answer this one, you first have to know that a hexagon has 6 sides. And in addition, you also have to know that to find the sum, or S, of the interior angles of a figure, it's going to be S equals 180 times n minus 2, where n is the number of sides that that figure has. So this becomes 180 times, again, we know a hexagon has 6 sides, so this is 6 minus 2. This becomes 180 times 4. And if you can't do that mentally, you could always do it off to the side like this: 180 times 4. 4 times 0 is 0. 8 times 4 is 32. Bring down a 2, carry a 3. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 is 7. So the sum of the interior angles of this hexagon is C, 720 degrees. Math knowledge practice test question. It says, which of the following is a prime number? Again, a number is considered prime if it's only divisible by 1 in itself. In other words, if it's divisible by something like 2 or 3, then it's not prime. Thankfully enough, 2 and 3 have divisibility rules we can apply to these answer choices to figure out which of them is prime. The divisibility rule for 2 says this: if the last digit in your number is even, then it is divisible by 2 and can't be prime. If we look at answer choice A, this ends in 6, which is even. Therefore, 26 is divisible by 2 and can't be prime. The divisibility rule for 3 says this: sum the digits that you're given in the number. If the sum is divisible by 3, then the number itself is divisible by 3. So for instance, 5 plus 1 is 6. 6 is divisible by 3. Therefore, I know 51 is divisible by 3 and is in prime. Let's check 171. 1 plus 7 plus 1 is 9. 9 is divisible by 3. Therefore, 171 is also divisible by 3 and can't be prime. So the correct answer to this one is C. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: 13 over 4 equals which of the following decimals? So this improper fraction tells you what to do. Improper fractions can be read as follows: 13 divided by 4. Now all we have to do is work this out to get our answer. 4 goes into 13 3 times without going over. 4 times 3 is 12. 13 minus 12 is 1. To continue doing this long division, we're going to add a couple of 0 placeholders as well as a decimal. Bring that decimal into our answer, drop down one of our 0 placeholders. 4 times 2 is 8. 10 minus 8 is going to be 2. Drop down our 0 placeholder. 4 times 5 is 20. 20 minus 20 is 0. Can't do any more, so we know our answer is 3.25D. Solve this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says, what percentage of the grid is shaded? So first and foremost, we have to figure out how big this grid is. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is a 10 by 10 grid, which means that there are 100 total squares in it. Of those 100, 10, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 25 of them are shaded. All right, let's convert this to a percentage very quickly. We can divide out a common factor of 25 to reduce this. 25 divided by 25 is 1. 100 divided by 25 is 4. You should know that the decimal equivalent of 1/4 is 0.25, which if you multiply it by 100, converts it to a percent. So this is 25%, which is answer choice C. This ASVAB PiCAT math knowledge practice test question says if one side of a regular hexagon is x plus 2, then its perimeter is. So to answer this question, you have to know some properties of hexagons. Specifically, you have to know that in regular hexagons, all the side lengths are equal. So if this side is x plus 2, that means all the other sides of this hexagon are x plus 2. In addition, you have to know how to find the perimeter of polygons, including hexagons. Well, to find the perimeter of any polygon, you simply add up all of its sides. In a hexagon, there are 6 sides, so we could do 6 times x plus 2, of course. We're going to take this 6, we're going to multiply it here as well as here. This becomes 6x plus 12. So the perimeter of this regular hexagon is C, 6x plus 12. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says a plumber has a car payment of $250 per month, $225 of which goes to paying off the principal, and the rest goes toward the interest. What percent is being paid for interest? So if he pays $225 out of $250 for the principal, That means he pays 25, again, 250 minus 225 is $25 toward the interest. Let's go ahead and place this over his total payment amount, that is 250. And by doing 25 divided by 250, we can convert this to a decimal and then a percent pretty easily. That said, you should see that we can also simplify this by a common factor of 25. 25 divided by 25 is 1. 250 divided by 25 is 10. This is the same thing as point 0.1. You should know that, which is the same thing as 10%. In other words, 10% of his payment is for the interest. The answer choice is B. Solve this ASVAB math knowledge practice test question in 60 seconds. It says, what is the area of a rectangle? For the ASVAB and PiCAT, you have to know some very basic formulas, including how to find the area of a rectangle. In case you forgot, that's area is equal to the length of the rectangle times the width of the rectangle. You should see that the length of this rectangle is 6, whereas the width of this rectangle is 4. Let's plug those values in accordingly. This becomes 6 times 4. And as a reminder, on the ASVAB, you cannot use a calculator, so you have to know that 6 times 4 is going to be 24. So the correct answer to this is the area of this rectangle is D, 24 square feet. This ASVAB PiCAT math knowledge practice test question, we're trying to figure out what the reciprocal of 7 is and the reciprocal of 3 1/5. Let's start with 7. The first thing I'm going to do is write that as a fraction by placing it over 1. Again, 7 divided by 1 is just 7. To find the reciprocal, we're just going to flip-flop these two. Reciprocal of 7 over 1 is 1 over 7. Let's do the same thing for 3 1/5. First thing we have to do, however, is convert this to an improper fraction. We do that like this. 3 times 5 is 15 plus 1 is 16. So this is 16 over 5 as an improper fraction. Now to find the reciprocal, let's just do a flip-flop here. This becomes 5 over 16. So our two reciprocals are 1/7 and 5 over 16, which is answer choice D. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says when the temperature is 20 degrees Celsius, what is it on the Fahrenheit scale? Use the following formula. F equals 9 over 5 times Celsius plus 32. So for this one, we're told that Celsius or C is 20. All we have to do in this case is plug it into this formula and solve accordingly. So this becomes 9 over 5 times 20 plus 32. Again, according to your order of operations, you do multiplication before addition. And to make this math a little bit easier, I'm going to place 20 over 1, which is going to enable me to cross reduce by saying 5 goes into 5 one time, 5 goes into 24 times. 9 over 1 is just 9 times 4 over 1, that's just 4 plus 32. 9 times 4 is 36, so this is 36 plus 32. Should be able to do this mentally. 30 and 30 is 60. 6 and 2 is 8, so the correct answer to this one is D, 68 degrees. Solve this ASVAB math knowledge practice test question in 60 seconds. It says this, what is 3a squared plus a squared added to a plus 6? You should recognize that you're being asked to combine two polynomials, notably 3a squared plus a squared and a plus 6 via addition. To do that, it looks like this, 3a squared plus a squared plus a plus 6. Now that we've created this expression, we have to simplify it by combining like terms. Again, like terms have the same letter variables raised to the same power. Here you can see we have a raised to the second power and a raised to the second power here. Therefore, we can combine these two. Again, if it's helpful, put that 1 in front of a squared. 3a squared plus 1a squared is 4a squared. Cross these out now. A doesn't have corresponding like terms, just go ahead and bring it down as is. Likewise, 6 doesn't have corresponding like terms, just go ahead and bring it down as is. Clearly, the answer is 4a squared plus a plus 6. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, what is the result of adding negative 3x squared minus 5x plus 1 and 8x squared minus 2x minus 9? So we're just adding this polynomial to this polynomial via simple addition like so. All we have to do is reduce this expression by combining like terms. Again, like terms have the same letter variables raised to the same power. So negative 3x squared and positive 8x squared are like terms. That simplifies to 5x squared. Cross these out. Now we have negative 5x and negative 2x. Negative 5x plus negative 2x is going to be negative 7x. cross them out now that we've combined them. 1 plus -9 is going to be -8. So the correct answer to this one is 5x squared minus 7x minus 8, which is answer choice C, of course. Solve this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT in 60 seconds. It says, what is the slope of the line y minus 1 half x equals 3? So first and foremost, you should recognize that this equation is almost in slope-intercept form. Again, slope-intercept form for equation of a line is y equals mx plus b. What we have here is y minus 1 half x equals 3. Clearly, to get this in slope-intercept form, all we have to do is move this 1 half x to the other side of the equal sign via addition. In doing so, this crosses out here, leaving with y equals 1 half x plus 3. Now, again, this m right here is the slope. And now that this is in slope-intercept form, we can see that the slope is 1 half. So the answer to this is B, 1 half. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, if a triangle has a height of 12 inches and an area of 42 square inches, how long is the base of the triangle? So for all triangles, we're going to use this formula to find area. Area equals 1 half base times height. You have to memorize that one for the test. In this case, we're not finding area. We're going to be solving for B. That said, we were given H. We know that's 12. And we were given area, or A. We know that's 42. Let's plug those in. This becomes 42 equals 1 half base, and the height is 12. All right, so this is 42 equals, what's 1 half times 12? 1 half times 12 is going to be 6. So this is 6b. All we have to do is solve for b, or base, by dividing both sides by 6. This crosses out, leaving you with b on this side. 42 divided by 6 is 7. So the answer to this one is B, 7. The base is 7 inches long. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says factor this. Of course, you can use the answer choices to figure this one out. Otherwise, you have to use the AC method. A times C in this case is going to be 2 times -3, which is -6. B is 1. There's a coefficient of 1 there. We're looking for two numbers that multiply to -6 and add to 1. That's going to be 3, -2. Using those two numbers, we can rewrite this expression to be 2x squared minus 2xy plus 3xy minus 3y squared. Now we can factor this one via grouping. We're going to factor out a 2x here. This comes x minus y in parentheses. Here we're going to factor out a 3y. This becomes x minus y in parentheses. Combine these, this becomes 2x plus 3y times x minus y. This is answer choice B, of course. Solve this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT in 60 seconds. It says if a equals 6 and b equals 5, what is the value of a squared minus b squared all squared? So let's start by plugging in 6 for a and 5 for b respectively. Of course, this becomes 6 squared minus 5 squared all squared. We're going to use the order of operations to figure out what to do next. Order of operations is PEMDAS. According to the order of operations, we do parentheses first, and then we do all this after that. In parentheses, you can see we have three operations. 6 squared, that's one operation. Subtraction, that's another operation. And 5 squared, that's another operation. We're going to take care of our exponents before our subtraction. This becomes 36 minus 25 squared. Again, we're still working in parentheses. 36 minus 25 is 11. This is 11 squared, which is 121. So the answer to this one is A, 121. This ASVAB PiCAT math knowledge practice test question says, what is the circumference of a circle that has a diameter of 10 centimeters? Use 3.14 for pi. So for circumference, you have to know one of two formulas. Circumference is either going to be found by using pi times diameter, or it's going to be 2 pi r, where r stands for radius, of course. We were given diameter, so we're going to use this first formula. Circumference equals pi. The diameter, according to the problem, is 10. So this becomes 3.14 times 10. Again, you could do this like this, 10 times 3.14, but you should be able to do this one mentally. When you multiply something by a power of 10, you move that decimal to the right according to how many zeros there are in the power of 10. So we're going to shift this one place to the right. 3.14 times 10 is 31.4. So the correct answer to this one is going to be C, 31.4 centimeters. This ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question says this: the area of one circle is 4 times as large as a smaller circle with a radius of 3 inches. The radius of the larger circle is. So we're talking about area of circles. That's going to be area equals pi r squared. Let's talk about the area of the smaller circle. That's going to be area equals pi times its radius squared. Its radius is 3, so this is going to be 3 squared. In other words, its area is 9 pi. We know that the larger circle has 4 times the area of the smaller circle, so its area is going to be 4 times 9 pi. 9 times 4 is going to be 36. So the larger circle has an area of 36 pi. Again, we want to know its radius, not r squared. This is r squared. How are we going to go from r squared to r? We're going to take the square root of 36. The square root of 36 is simply 6. So the radius of our larger circle is d6 inches. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, it says if x equals -2 and y equals 3, what is the value of 2x minus 3 over y minus 5? So we're going to evaluate this expression, and of course we're going to plug in -2 for x and 3 for y. Let's go ahead and do that. This becomes 2 times -2 minus 3 all over 3 minus 5. Let's go ahead and work this out. 2 times -2, a positive times a negative is going to be a negative. So this is -4 minus 3 over 3 minus 5. That's going to be -2. Let's go ahead and continue working this out. -4 minus 3 is going to be -7 over -2. Now you have a negative over a negative. A negative over a negative becomes a positive. In other words, those two negatives cancel each other out. So the correct answer to this one is B, 7 over 2. Solve this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says if x equals 2 and y equals -3, then xy squared equals. So let's copy this one down as if we're writing on our own scratch paper. Again, we're told to let x equal 2, y is going to be -3, and we're going to be plugging those values into x, y squared. Let's go ahead and substitute them in. This becomes 2 times -3 squared. Well, according to the order of operations, again, that's PEMDAS. We do exponents before we do multiplication. Of course, that means we're going to do -3 squared before we multiply by 2. Let's do this off to the side. -3 squared is the same thing as -3 times -3. You should know that a negative times a negative is a positive. Specifically, -3 times -3 is +9. So this simply becomes 2 times 9, which is 18. So the answer to this one is B, 18. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if x equals -3, what is the value of x squared minus 2x plus 4? So we're going to take x equaling -3 and we're going to plug it in here, x squared minus 2x plus 4. Let's go ahead and plug that in for x accordingly. This becomes -3 squared minus 2 times -3 plus 4. -3 squared is the same thing as -3 times -3, which is going to be a +9. -2 times -3 is going to be +6. Again, a negative times a negative is a positive. Plus 4. 9 plus 6 is 15. Plus 4 is going to be 19. So the correct answer to this one is D, 19. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if x equals -2 and y equals 3, what is the value of 2y minus x? So we're going to be evaluating the expression 2y minus x when x equals -2 and y equals 3, of course. Let's plug those values in and then simplify. This becomes 2 times 3 minus -2. 2 times 3 is 6, of course. Now, what are we going to do with a minus -2? A minus minus becomes a plus. So this becomes 6 plus 2, which you should know is 8. So the correct answer to this one is B8. Be very careful on this test because negatives can mess you up. A minus a negative becomes a plus, as we just saw. This math knowledge practice test question says if x equals y, what is 100 plus 3 times x minus y in parentheses? So the quickest way to solve this one is to give x a real value. I'm going to give it a real value of 5 since 5 in general is pretty easy to work with. If x equals y and x equals 5, that means y must also equal 5. Let's go ahead and plug this in. This becomes 100 plus 3 times x minus y. We now know what x and y are. This becomes 3. X is 5. Y is also 5. This becomes 100 plus 3. 5 minus 5 is 0. You should know that 3 times 0 is 0. So this is just 100, which is answer choice B, of course. For this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, we're going to be evaluating the expression 3 times 2x minus y all over x plus y when x equals 2 and y equals negative 3. Let's plug those in and evaluate accordingly. This becomes 3 times 2 minus, again, y is negative 3 all over 2 plus negative 3. Let's start with the denominator. 2 plus negative 3 is going to be negative 1. Let's work out what's in parentheses very quickly. 2 times 2 is 4 minus negative 3. Minus a negative becomes a plus, so this is plus 3. This becomes 3 times 7 over negative 1. 3 times 7 is 21 over negative 1. Positive divided by a negative is going to be a negative. So this is D, negative 21. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: if x equals 4, which of the following expressions does not equal 9? So wherever we see x in each of these expressions, we're going to plug in 4. And in doing so, we're going to be able to determine which of these does not equal 9. So we have 3 times 4 plus negative 3. 3 times 4 is 12 plus negative 3. That's the same thing as 12 minus 3, which is in fact 9. This one is simply 4 plus 5, which equals 9. This one becomes 4 minus 13, which equals negative 9. So this one does not equal 9. Therefore, we know C is the expression that does not equal 9. We don't even have to check D because we have our answer already. Solve this math knowledge practice test question. It says, what is 5x times 3x squared minus 5? So we have 5x times 3x squared minus 5. In other words, we're going to take this 5x and multiply it here as well as here. This becomes 15x to the third minus 25x, which is answer choice B. In case you didn't know how this became x to the third, let's take a look at the product rule real quick. It says a to the m times a to the n equals a to the m plus n. And let's see how this applies here. Here we have 5x times 3x squared. Again, this becomes this 15. Then we have x to the first times x squared. Of course, according to the product rule, that becomes 15 to the x1 plus 2, which is equal to 15x to the third. Okay, so that's the product rule. You need to know it for the ASVAB. This ASVAB PiCAT math knowledge practice test question says this: what is 5 to the x power when x equals 3? So we have 5 to the x power, and we're told to let x equal 3. Let's start by plugging in 3 for x. This becomes 5 to the third power, which is the same thing as 5 times 5 times 5. You should be able to work this one out mentally. Again, 5 times 5 is 25. 25 times 5 is going to be 125. So the answer is D. On test day, of course, you might be a little bit nervous, so it's okay to work things out the long way. You could have said 25 times 5 off to the side like this. 5 times 5 is 25. Bring down a 5, carry a 2. 2 times 5 is 10, plus 2 is 12. All right, that is that one. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says solve the following equation for D. It says B equals CD. Well, this is a literal equation, and our goal here is to get D equal to something by itself, as you can kind of see from our answer choices. This says C times D. To get rid of C, we're going to do the opposite operation of multiplication. That is, we're going to divide both sides of the equation by C. In doing so, this crosses out. Says D equals B over C. And then if you want to write it like an answer choice, you just do this: D equals B over C, which we can see is answer choice C in this case. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, which of the following is the smallest prime number greater than 200? So first we have to understand that a number is considered prime if it's only divisible by 1 in itself. 7 is prime because it only has 2 factors, notably 1 and 7. and 1 is never a prime number. So we're going to use divisibility rules for 2, 3, and 5 to figure this one out. Divisibility rule for 2 says if the last digit in the number is even, then that number is divisible by 2 and is in prime. 214 ends in a 4, which is even. 214 is divisible by 2. The divisibility rule for 5 says if the last digit in the number is a 0 or a 5, that number is divisible by 5 and therefore is in prime. Divisibility rule for 3 says if the sum of the digits is divisible by 3, then that number is going to be divisible by 3 and can't be prime. 2 plus 0 plus 1 is 3. 3 is divisible by 3. Therefore, 201 is divisible by 3 and can't be prime. So the correct answer to this one is C211. This ASVAB PiCAT math knowledge practice test question says this: what is z to the x plus 2 power when x equals 2 and z equals 2? So let's start by plugging in those values accordingly. Again, we're going to plug in 2 for z here and 2 for x there. That becomes this, 2 to the second plus 2 power. In other words, we have 2 to the fourth power. 2 to the fourth power is the same thing as 2 multiplied by itself 4 times. You should be able to work that out mentally. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 2, of course, is 16. So the answer to this one is C, 16. Solve this ASVAB math knowledge practice test question. It says, what is the product of the reciprocals of 0 0.5, 1/4, and 3? So we have to know the fraction equivalent of 0 0.5 is 1/2. To find its reciprocal, we just flip it. So that's going to be 2 over 1. Reciprocal of 1/4, we just flip it. That's going to be 4 over 1. Reciprocal of 3. 3 can be written as a fraction as 3 over 1. Find its reciprocal by flipping it. That's 1/3. So we're multiplying together 2 over 1 times 4 over 1 times 1 over 3. Again, when you multiply fractions, you just multiply straight across. So this becomes 2 times 4, which is 8 times 1, which is 8. This is 1 times 1, which is 1 times 3 is 3. So now we have to convert 8/3 to a mixed number. We're going to do that via division. This becomes 8 divided by 3. 3 goes in 8 2 times without going over. 2 times 3 is 6. 8 minus 6 is 2. So this is 2 and 2/3. So our answer is C, 2 and 2/3. Solve this ASVAB math knowledge practice test question in 60 seconds. It says find the slope of the line that passes through the points -5, -2, and 3, -9. So for this one, you have to know the slope formula, which is m referring to slope equals y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. Let's identify those. This is x1, this is y1, this is x2, this is y2. Let's plug those in and solve. So this equals y2, which is -9, minus y1, which is -2, all over x2, which is 3, minus x1, which is -5. These double negatives become positive, so -9 minus -2 is the same thing as -9 plus 2. 3 minus -5 is the same thing as 3 plus 5. Let's do the bottom first. 3 plus 5 is 8. -9 plus 2 is -7. So the correct answer to this one is going to be B, -7/8. Question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, which of the following fractions is the largest? Right away, you should say that 7 out of 10 is zero point 0.7, which may be the largest. 2 out of 5, you should know, is zero point 0.4. That said, you should also be able to say that 2.5 out of 5 would be exactly zero point 0.5. This, of course, is smaller than zero point 0.7. Similarly, you should be able to say that 4 out of 8 would be zero point 0.5. This is smaller than that, so it's smaller than zero point 0.7. This last one's a little bit harder, so I'm going to revert to doing long division. I could read this as 13 divided by 16, add a decimal and a 0 placeholder, bring that decimal up. So if this is bigger than 0.7, we know D is the biggest fraction. Let's do 16 times 8 off to the side to see if it is going to be bigger. 8 times 6 is 48, carry a 4. 8 times 1 is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So this is going to be 0.8 something. 0.8 something is bigger than 0.7. Solve this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says simplify 2/5 x plus x. So I know many of you can solve this one mentally. That said, sometimes on test day, people get a little nervous, and a simple problem like this can stump them. That said, let's work through it together. This says 2/5 x plus x. Well, as it happens, these are like terms, so we can simply add them together. If it's helpful, you can put that imaginary 1 in front of the x. So 2/5 x plus 1x is 1 and 2/5 x. That said, we look through our answer choices and we don't see it there, so we think we may have made a mistake. You haven't. All you have to do is convert this, which is very easy to do. Again, our denominator is not going to change. 1 times 5 is 5 plus 2 is 7. So this is b 7/5 x. This ASVAB math knowledge practice test question says this: if a circle has a diameter of 75 units, how many units is its radius? You have to know that in all circles, the diameter is always going to be twice as long as the radius. That is, diameter equals 2r. This problem tells you that d equals 75, and you're going to be solving for r. Now that we know d equals 75, let's plug it in right here. Equals 2r. Again, we're solving for r, so we're going to divide both sides by 2. In doing so, we get to cross this out. This equals r. 75 divided by 2. If you can't do that in your head, you could always do it off to the side like this. 75 divided by 2. 2 goes into 7. 3 times without going over. 2 times 3 is 6. 7 minus 6 is 1. Bring down this 5. 2 goes into 15. 7 times without going over. 2 times 7 is 14. 15 minus 14 is 1. Add a decimal there. Add a decimal there. Add a 0 placeholder. Drop it down 2 times 5 is 10. So the radius is 37.5. For this ASVAB PiCAT math knowledge practice test question, we're trying to figure out what 9 to the 1/2 power is. Whenever you see a number raised to a fraction such as 1/2, 1/3, and 1/4, you automatically want to think about writing it as a radical. In this case, we're going to take our 9, it's called the radicand, we put it inside the radical symbol. This 1 is our exponent, and this 2 is our index. Typically, when we have an index of 2, we don't express it, and when we have an exponent of 1, we don't express it. Again, 9 to the first power is just 9. When you have a 2 outside the radical symbol, it just means square root. So in other words, 9 to the 1/2 power is the same thing as taking the square root of 9, which is 3. So the answer to this one is A3. If you need more help, check out my linked video on this topic. The ASVAB and PiCAT says Jose is twice as old as Karen. If Karen is n years old now, how old was Jose 7 years ago? So again, Karen is n years old now, and Jose is twice as old as Karen. So that means Jose is 2n years old now. The question is, how old was he 7 years ago? So we're going to take 2n, which is his current age, and we're going to subtract 7 from that. And that's all we have to do for this one. This one is C, 2n minus 7. For this math knowledge practice test question, we're trying to factor 9x to the third plus 18x squared minus x minus 2. To do so, we're going to use a technique called factoring by grouping, which means I'm going to look at 9x to the third and 18x squared, factor that. Then I'm going to factor negative x minus 2. So from 9x to the third plus 18x squared, I can, of course, factor out 9x squared. And in doing so, that leaves me with x plus 2 in parentheses. Now from negative x minus 2, I want to factor out a number such that I get x plus 2 in parentheses. So I'm going to factor out a negative 1. This becomes x plus 2 in parentheses. Now I have my answer. It's going to be 9x squared minus 1 times x plus 2, which is answer choice A. For this math knowledge practice test question, we're subtracting one polynomial from the other. So let's go ahead and set it up like this: 3a minus 9ab plus b. From that, we're subtracting this other polynomial. And I'm going to rewrite it to match this first polynomial. This is 7a minus ab plus 8b. Let's go ahead and take this negative, distribute it here, here, and here. This becomes 3a minus 9ab plus b minus 7a. Again, negative times a positive is a negative. Negative times a negative is a positive. Negative times a positive is a negative. Combined like terms, 3a and negative 7a is negative 4a. Just like that, we know our answer choice is A. Cross these out. Negative 9ab and ab are like terms. That's going to be negative 8ab. Cross this out. B and negative 8b are like terms. That's going to be negative 7b. For this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, we're trying to find the average of 1/2, 1/4, and 1/6. To find the average, we're going to add them all up and divide by 3, since there are 3 of them. To add these fractions, we have to have a common denominator, which you should see is 12. To write 2 as 12, we have to multiply it by 6, of course. To write 4 as 12, we multiply by 3. To write 6 as 12, we multiply by 2. Again, this is all divided by 3. 6 plus 3 is 9, 10, 11. So this is 11 over 12 divided by 3. Again, we could write 3 as a fraction by placing it over 1. To do division of two fractions, follow the algorithm keep, change, flip. Keep this as 11 over 12. Change from division to multiplication. Flip this to be 1 over 3. Again, multiplying fractions, you just multiply straight across. 11 times 1 is 11. 12 times 3 is 36. So this is A. Says if x squared minus 44 equals 100, then x equals. So there are two ways to solve this one. You could recognize that you have the difference of two perfect squares here, or you could solve it algebraically. Difference of two perfect squares says this: a squared minus b squared is going to be equal to a minus b times a plus b. And let's take a look at what we have here. We have x squared minus 44 equals 100. If we move 100 over here via subtraction, this crosses out, leaving you a 0 on this side. This becomes x squared minus 144 equals 0. And I can rewrite this like this: x squared minus 12 squared equals 0. So we do have our two perfect squares, so we can write it like this: x minus 12, x plus 12 equals 0. Let's set these each equal to 0. X minus 12 equals 0. X plus 12 equals 0. This is x equals 12, or x equals negative 12, which is answer choice C. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if 4x squared equals 16, then x equals. Let me say this: there are three ways you can solve this one. You could recognize that you have the difference of two perfect squares here and solve this one via factoring. You could also take your answer choices, plug them in, and find which pair works. And finally, you can solve this one algebraically. Of course, let's go ahead and do that. We have 4x squared equals 16. Again, we're solving for x, so we want to get x by itself. So let's divide both sides by 4. This crosses out, leaving you with x squared on this side. 16 divided by 4 is 4. To get rid of this square, we're going to take the square root of both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with x on this side. The square root of 4 is going to be plus or minus 2. As it happens, this actually has two solutions, notably negative 2 or positive 2. If you plug both those in for x, you'll see that they both work. This ASVAB math practice test question says this: if 1/8 divided by 1/4 equals c, then what is c? So in this case, we're dividing two fractions, notably 1/8 by 1/4. When you divide fractions, you have to follow the algorithm keep, change, flip. Keep refers to this fraction in the numerator. You keep it the same, so we'll keep 1/8 as 1/8. Change refers to the operation of division. You change it from division to multiplication. And flip refers to the fraction in the denominator. You flip it. So instead of being 1 over 4, it's going to be 4 over 1. Now that we've done that, we're just multiplying two fractions together, which means we're going to multiply straight across. Notably, this is going to become 1 times 4 over 8 times 1. 1 times 4 is 4. 8 times 1 is 8. You can reduce this by dividing out a common factor of 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 8 divided by 4 is 2. So the answer to this one is clearly B, 1/2. Solve this ASVAB math knowledge practice test question in 60 seconds. It says this: which of the following is not an equation of a line? So remember, equations of lines can be represented in four different forms. You have slope-intercept form, which looks like this: y equals mx plus b. You have the point slope form, which is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. You have a vertical line where x equals some constant a, and you have a horizontal line where y equals some constant b. The easiest way to figure out which of these is not an equation of a line is to find the one where one of the letter variables is raised to some power other than 1. As you can see in answer choice D, we have x raised to the second power, which is going to make this a parabola, not a line. And all these other answer choices match one of these four forms. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: if x plus a times x plus b equals x squared plus 7x plus 12, what is the value of a plus b? So the easiest way to solve this one is to go ahead and factor x squared plus 7x plus 12. That should be fairly easy to do. It's going to look like this. We're looking for two numbers that multiply to 12 and add to 7. That's going to be plus 3 plus 4. Again, 4 times 3 is 12. 4 plus 3 is 7. So we know this is our A. This is going to be our B. This becomes 3 plus 4 which is 7. So the correct answer to this one is A, 7. This ASVAB PiCAT math knowledge practice test question says a circle has a circumference of 12 pi centimeters. What is the radius of the circle? So when we talk about circumference of circles, you have to know one of two formulas. Notably, circumference is equal to 2 pi r, or circumference equals pi times diameter. In this case, we're talking about circumference and radius, so we're going to use this top formula. Notably, circumference equals 2 pi r. According to the problem, we know our circle has a circumference of 12 pi. So let's plug that in accordingly, equals 2 pi r. According to this problem, we're trying to figure out what r, the radius, is. So we're going to divide both sides by 2 pi to get r by itself. This crosses out here, leaving you with r on this side. These pi's cross out. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So the radius of this circle is C6 centimeters. That's all there is to that one. You do have to know both those formulas for this test. Solve this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says, what is the area of a parallelogram? Its length is x minus 3 and its height is x plus 5. So to find the area of a parallelogram, its area equals base times height. That's one of the formulas you do have to memorize for this test. Of course, we're given both those things in this case. We're told h, or height, is x plus 5, and the length, or the base, or b, is x minus 3. Just plug those in. X minus 3 times x plus 5. Of course, we're going to have to multiply this out to match one of our answer choices here. Again, you just do x times x times 5, negative 3 times x, negative 3 times 5. This becomes x times x, which is x squared. X times 5 is plus 5x. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. Negative 3 times positive 5 is negative 15. Let's simplify this. X squared plus 2x minus 15. Of course, that is answer choice D. ASVAB PiCAT math knowledge practice test question says, what is the product of the reciprocals of 2/3, 1/8, and 5? So we have 2/3, 1/8, and 5. The first thing we need to do is find the reciprocal, which means we're just going to flip-flop the numbers. So this is going to be 3 over 2, 8 over 1. 5 can be written as a fraction by placing it over 1, so this is going to be 1 over 5. Let's find the product of those, so multiply them. 3 over 2 times 8 over 1 times 1 over 5. When you multiply fractions, you just multiply your numerators and then multiply your denominators. 3 times 8 is 24, times 1 is 24. 2 times 1 is 2, times 5 is 10. This is 2.4, which is not an answer choice. That said, we can convert this to a mixed number pretty easily. 10 times 2 would be 20. That gives us a remainder of 4 out of 10. We can simplify that pretty easily. This becomes 4 divided by 2, which is 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So this is D. This ASVAB PiCAT math knowledge practice test question, we're trying to find the slope of 2, 4, and negative 2, negative 4. So we're going to need the slope equation, notably m, which means slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Of course, we get those values from our points. This is x1, this is y1, this is x2, this is y2. Just plug them in and do this arithmetic. Y2 is right here. It's negative 4 minus y1. It's 4 over x2. It's right there. Negative 2 minus x1. It's right there. It's 2. Negative 4 minus 4 is going to be negative 8. Negative 2 minus 2 is negative 4. A negative divided by a negative becomes a positive. 8 divided by 4 is going to be 2. So the correct answer to this one is A, 2. For this math knowledge practice test question, we're trying to figure out which of these is the smallest fraction. So let's go ahead and multiply this by 2 to get started. This is 4/10, which is 0.4. Let's convert these to decimals via some quick long division. Add a decimal and a 0 placeholder. 9 times 4 is 36. We're not going to keep working these out because this is 0.4 something. This is exactly 0.4. Let's hope one of these is smaller. Add a decimal 0 placeholder, bring that decimal up. 7 times 4 is 28. We're not going to keep working out. This is 0.4 something. 3 divided by 8, add a decimal 0 placeholder. 8 times 4 would be 32, which is too big. 8 times 3 is 24. So you should see that 0.3 is smaller than 0.4 something, exactly 0.4 and 0.4 something. So the correct answer to this one is D. For this ASVAB PiCAT math knowledge practice test question, we're trying to figure out which of the following fractions is less than 25%, which is the same thing as 1/4 or 0.25 in decimal form. Let's just go from top to bottom. 2/5. Let's multiply this by 2 and this by 2. This becomes 4 over 10, which is 40%. That's bigger than 25%, of course. 1/3, you should know, is 33%, which is bigger than 25%. 5/16. Let's start this long division here. 5 divided by 16. Add a 0 and a decimal. 16 goes into 50 three times without going over. 16 times 3 is 48. This is going to be 0.3 something, so I know this is bigger than 25%. What about 1/8? Well, what is 2/8? 2/8 is the same thing as 1/4. 2/8 is bigger than 1/8. So the correct answer here is D. Solve this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says if 4 over 3 times 3 over 4 equals 5z, then z equals. Let's start by copying this one down. Again, on the ASVAB and PiCAT, you will have your own scratch paper and you'll want to use it. So we're going to be solving for z, of course. Let's take care of this multiplication real quick to make this one a little bit easier to see. As you can see, we're multiplying two fractions, which means you're just going to multiply straight across. In other words, this is going to become 4 times 3 over 3 times 4 equals 5z. This becomes 12 over 12 equals 5z. 12 divided by 12 is 1 equals 5z. Divide both sides by 5 to get z by itself. This crosses out, leaving you with just z on this side. As you can see, z equals 1/5, which is answer choice C. Nothing too difficult there. That said, you had to be able to work with fractions. Solve this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says if x squared minus 44 equals 100, then x equals. Let's start by copying this one down. Again, on test day, you will have your own scratch paper. We're solving for x, so ultimately we want to get x equal to something by itself. Let's go ahead and add 44 to both sides of this equation. This crosses out here, leaving us with x squared over here. 100 plus 44 is 144. Let's get x by itself by taking the square root of both sides. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving us with x. When you take the square root of a positive number, the answer is always going to be plus or minus. Square root of 144, you should know, is 12. That said, that plus or minus isn't one of our answer choices. So you have to know we could write this like this: x equals 12 or x equals negative 12. Since we only have positive 12 as an answer choice, we're going to go with C, positive 12. Solve this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says if x over 5 plus 6 equals negative 14, then x equals. Let's start by copying this one down. Again, on the ASVAB and PiCAT, you will have your own scratch paper, so I encourage you to use it. Again, we're solving for x, so ultimately we want to get x equal to something by itself. Let's subtract 6 from both sides. In doing so, we get to cross this out. This leaves us with x over 5 on this side. Negative 14 minus 6 is negative 20. And then finally, let's get x by itself by removing this 5 from the denominator. To do that, we're going to multiply both sides of the equation by 5. In doing so, that crosses out there, leaving you with just x. Negative 20 times 5 is going to be negative 100. So the answer to this one is C, negative 100. Again, for the ASVAB, you have to be able to work with positives and negatives. Negative times a positive is a negative. Solve this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says if 4x squared equals 16, then x equals. So this is 4x squared equals 16. Let's start by dividing both sides by 4 to get x squared by itself. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving you with x squared equals 16 divided by 4 is 4. To get rid of this square, we're going to do the opposite operation. Notably, we're going to take the square root of both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with this, x equals. When you take the square root of a positive number, the answer is always plus or minus, and the square root of 4 is 2. So your answer could look like this: x equals plus or minus 2, x equals 2, or x equals negative 2. If you plug in positive 2 or negative 2 here, it will work. So we're going to go with answer choice B, x equals plus or minus 2. Solve this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says if 4 times x plus 6 in parentheses equals 44, then x equals. Let me start by saying this. I know many of you, like me, can solve this one mentally. That's great. That said, on test day, things happen. You might be a little nervous and your mental math may not be as good as it is when you're sitting in your own house. So for that reason, let's work this one out off to the side. It says 4x plus 6 equals 44. Let's get rid of this 4 via division of both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with x plus 6 over here. 44 divided by 4 is 11. Subtract 6 from both sides. Now this crosses out. X equals 11 minus 6, which is 5. The answer, of course, is 5. Let's check it real quick. 5 plus 6 is 11. 11 times 4 is 44. So we know we did it correctly. For this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, we're trying to solve the equation 3p minus 5 plus 2p equals 25 minus 5p for p. So let's start by combining 3p and 2p to make that 5p minus 5 equals 25 minus 5p. Now we're going to get all the p's to one side of the equal sign and everything else to the other side. I'm going to add 5p to both sides right here. In doing so, this crosses out and this becomes 10p. And at the same time, I'm going to add this 5 over here via addition. This crosses out, leaving me with the equal sign over here. 25 plus 5 is 30. Divide both sides by 10 now to get p by itself. This becomes p equals 30 divided by 10, which you should know is 3. So the correct answer to this one is B, p equals 3. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, we're going to be solving for x. The first thing we have to do is distribute this 3, distribute this -2, and distribute this 5 accordingly. This becomes 3x plus 3 minus 6x plus 2. Again, a negative times a negative is a positive, equals 5x minus 10 plus 7. All right, let's combine like terms and solve. 3x and -6x is going to be -3x. 3 and 2 is going to be 5. 5x doesn't have a like term. 10 and -7 becomes -3. Let's move this over here via addition. This crosses out. This becomes 8x. Let's move this one over here via addition. This crosses out. This becomes 8. Divide both sides by 8 to get x by itself. This becomes 1. 8 divided by 8 is 1. So the correct answer is C, 1. This ASVAB PiCAT math knowledge practice test question says this: if 3 times x plus 6 in parentheses equals 39, then x equals. So in other words, we're going to be solving this equation here. We have 3x plus 6 equaling 39, of course. Let's get rid of this 3 by dividing both sides of the equation by 3. This crosses out, leaving you with x plus 6 over here. This mental math is actually very easy to do. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So to get x by itself, all we have to do is subtract 6 from both sides now. This becomes x equals 13 minus 6 is 7. Correct answer is A, 7. Let's go ahead and check it very quickly by plugging in 7 for x right here. This becomes 3 times 13, which is in fact 39. So we know we did it correctly. This ASVAB math knowledge practice test question says, what is the result of subtracting 4x squared minus 3x plus 1 from 2x squared plus 5x minus 2? So we have to set this one up correctly. We have 2x squared plus 5x minus 2. From that, we're subtracting 4x squared minus 3x plus 1. This is 2x squared plus 5x minus 2. Distribute this negative there, and there. This becomes minus 4x squared plus 3x minus 1. Combine like terms, 2x squared negative 4x squared is negative 2x squared. Cross them out. 5x and 3x is 8x. Negative 2 plus negative 1 is negative 3. So the correct answer to this one is C.